Okay, so good evening. My name is Rolf Oben. I'm chairman of the Darien RTM Public Works Committee, and we are starting a special meeting on Monday, January 31st. And the purpose of this meeting is in response to a letter that came to numerous residents in the town of Darien with respect to the drainage pipe that runs under I-95 off the exit 10 southbound on-ramp underneath I-95 and then discharges out near Maple Street. So we are honored this evening to have a number of special guests from the town. Monica McNally, First Selectman, Ed Gentile, Town Supervisor, and Darren Ostafane, our engineer. So without any further ado, I'd like to turn this meeting over to them at this point and have them give us some input to what they are certainly aware of this project. So I'd like to get some input from them about what their posture is about this project. We did send an advance listing of some questions and concerns, which possibly they will address during the course of what they have to say. So without further ado, I'm going to try and unmute, or if you would, Monica and Ed and Darren, unmute yourselves if you can. And
hi everyone, great to see the Public Works Committee again. I have some fond memories from this group, and I'm very happy to have Darren and Ed here to answer your questions on this project. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Rolf, can you hear me okay?
yes, I can, Ed. Thank you.
All right. I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
First, I want to thank you for inviting us here. I understand that these letters went out. Usually followed closely by, it caught everybody off guard, but this is generally how they introduce their projects. The DOT does, trying to work their way from a smaller group to a larger group. There will be a public information meeting held on the 10th of February that you all got notices for, followed a month later by a public announcement to the town for another meeting, which is in March, I think March 9th. So those that you'll see also come out. But just so you know, this project is not a surprise to us, other than to say that Darren has been involved in the meetings with the consultant on this project and the DOT. They recently did have a meeting to review the design work and questions that we had here in our office. Rolf, I'll tell you, we went through your questions here, and in a second, I'm going to turn it over to Darren to walk us through some of these, the questions and bullet points that you had on your list. I don't know if you have the list that had been sent out to your folks on your committee or anyone else, but if we have to, I think Darren may be able to put it up on the screen too, but we'll find out as we go. But first, I want to say that these are really good questions, and we have some information and some answers to them. But I'd like to reinforce and request that at the meeting on the 10th of February, that you ask these questions of the DOT also, because I think you want to hear from them what their thoughts are, not our interpretations of our thoughts, but we did get some good information from them that can fill in and answer these questions that you have here on your list. But I really want to, if you don't ask them at the meeting, then I'm going to, but I think we need to hear from them exactly how they're going to work their project and what their thought process was and what they think their responsibilities are. And, getting into the weeds of it also of how did they analyze this engineering wise? What was their thought process in picking this type of pipe and this type of construction process and so on. So without any further delay, because I know that Monica has a 7 o'clock meeting tonight. Just want to let you folks be aware of that. Myself and Darren will stay on if we have to, but she may have to step aside. I don't want to speak for her, but I just wanted to let you know there is another meeting that on the budget at 7 o'clock that she may have to leave if this meeting goes past 7. Okay?
Yeah, that's understood.
All right, Darren, it's all yours.
Okay, thanks. And I guess I'm going to go through your questions. I'll just take them as you have them listed here, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the first question that the committee came up with is, what is the primary water source feeding into this pipe? Ledge Road, West Avenue, Heights Road, Federal Realty, Norotan Heights, commuter parking lot, or a natural water course? Kind of all of them. In a broader sense, the watershed area encompasses Middlesex Middle School, the back half, draining out the back, and up north to Middlesex Road, maybe even a little bit north of Middlesex Road, and east towards Norotan Avenue. That's kind of the whole watershed. There must have been a natural drainage way because the culvert is so big. At some point, there must have been some sort of a stream there or something. And over the years, everything got piped through the Stop and Shop. And underneath, when the railroad tracks were built, they obviously built a stone culvert there to take care of all the water that collects there, because the railroad itself sort of created an artificial dam. If that culvert wasn't there, well, we know the culvert's undersized and it acts like a dam and floods Heights Road. So that's where all the water's coming from. And it goes underneath the railroad tracks, discharges into a catch basin. You guys can all see my screen, right? Like,
Yes.
Can you see my mouse moving?
Yes.
Okay, that's the catch basin. And this is the I-95 on-ramp going towards Stamford.
Yeah.
This is I-95, and this is the culvert that crosses under I-95 and the entrance ramp and discharges behind the houses in Maple Street. So here there's a catch basin, and that takes the water from the stone culvert from underneath the railroad tracks. That's where all the water from that watershed I just described ends up. Any questions on that?
No, it's actually, you're describing a lot more water than I thought.
It's a decent enough water. I mean, we've all seen the photos of Heights Road flooding. So it's a decent enough sized watershed, and yet small enough so that the only time we experience flooding there is during a very intense short storm. So it's small enough so that all the water gets there quickly, but big enough that that stone culvert just can't handle all the water that goes through.
Darren, Frank here, real quick question, and if you want to cover it later, you can. Can you compare the throughput or the volume or the cross-sectional area of the stone culvert that you described under the railroad tracks as compared to the culvert that we're talking about replacing here? Is it that the stone culvert has a much smaller capacity, and that this is not the capacity of this culvert under the highway is not a gating factor? Can you just compare those?
Sure. Actually, Ed did that calculation in our conversations earlier today. So it's a little bit jumping ahead out of order of your questions here, but I believe it was the existing cross-sectional area of the existing culvert is 18 square feet. When they finish, it's going to be 14. And the stone culvert, Ed, was 12?
10.5.
10.5. Okay. Yeah. So the stone culvert is in fact the smallest, and it's also the roughest. So that friction matters and how much flow you can get through a pipe. And it remains the limiting factor in the design of this whole thing and how the water gets underneath both of these two transportation facilities. So I'll jump back in order. Given the water sources feeding into this pipe, what effect will narrowing the pipe have on water flow into the pipe and water flow and velocity leaving the pipe? According to the engineer's calculations, we just mentioned the cross-sectional area is going to be smaller, the proposed cross-sectional area. And they have calculated that something called the Manning's N, it's a roughness coefficient, is much smoother. So the smoothness, as I said, friction matters. It's going to be less frictional resistance. So even though the pipe is a smaller cross-sectional area, it's still going to pass the same amount of water. So if you consider that the cross-sectional area is smaller and it's the same amount of water is going through, well, then the velocity has to go up. That's the only option. So the velocity will be greater. The amount of water going through will be about the same or imperceptibly different, in the words of the design engineer, which by the way is BL Companies, who is the liaison for the DOT. And so the narrowing of the pipe in and of itself would be, would have the effect of limiting the water going through it. But the fact that we have a less friction in the pipe, it's going to compensate and allow the same amount of flow through. Any questions on that?
So what you're saying is because of the difference in the texture inside the pipe, you're saying the water flow will be comparably the same, but the velocity will increase?
It has, yes, correct. It has to increase. If it doesn't increase, then you would have less flow. And the frictional factor that they put into the equation for this particular pipe is much less. It's much smoother. The pipe that's there is what we call a corrugated metal pipe, and it is what you would imagine. It has undulations which are much more frictionally resistant than the smooth pipe, smooth bore pipe.
Darren, can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
So the stone culvert that you're talking about is under the railroad tracks, but the project that DOT is looking at is only under the highway.
That's
Is that
correct.
correct?
That is
So
absolutely correct.
if the stone culvert is the narrower of the two or the slower of the two, why does it matter how fast it flows through what they're proposing to do?
That's
I
a
mean,
great
it's still
question, and
it's going to go no faster than it can get through the stone culvert, right?
You are correct. Yes, everything that you said, we agree with. This, if you look at this area here, where the catch basin is, it does take a little bit of water into this catch basin from along this entrance ramp. Also, you have a small portion of the Norotan Heights parking lot upstream of this catch basin. Presumably some of that runs around by post 53, comes down the ramp, and some of that gets in there. But when you consider everything that we just mentioned, very minimal and inconsequential. So yes, you're right. The bottom line is the stone culvert is the limiting factor.
So whatever water there is up on Heights Road now is not going to flow any faster through the improved culvert under the highway.
That is correct. Because chain's only as strong as weakest link. It's not getting through the stone culvert. You might recall, or a long time ago, 2007-ish, we talked about putting a new pipe under the railroad track. And of course, the new pipe under the railroad track, if we had done that project, couldn't be any bigger than the arched pipeway under the highway. Otherwise, we would flood the highway. Then the highway would be the limiting factor. So you're absolutely correct. The stone culvert is the limiting factor, and that culvert can take the water however fast it wants to, but it can't take it any faster than we can give it to it.
So can I ask a question? So that sort of begs the question, well, a couple of questions. Is there a plan to fix that culvert at some point? Has that, it's been discussed in the past, and were they to do that, if this pipe, which we're now narrowing. Yes, admittedly, it'll take the same amount of volume, if you know, taken at face value. Are we not then just moving the problem downstream?
If we fix the stone culvert to take as much water as the pipe underneath I-95 is capable of taking, we would absolutely be moving the problem downstream, and we would have to mitigate that. And
Right,
one of the
so-
mitigating,
Yeah, so I'm sorry, you're right. I can anticipate that you're going to say we need to direct this to the state of Connecticut, but if the state's going to undertake this project, I mean, wouldn't it make more sense to be putting in a larger pipe here in anticipation of, which I know is a big project, but in anticipation that at some point, look, if we're ultimately trying to fix the upstream problem of flooding in the Heights area, this, I'm not sure how I mean, which is my focus. I'm not sure how this helps much.
it's not going to help Heights Road much at all. But to answer your first question more directly, I am unaware of any plans to actually construct the previous study that we did of increasing the culvert under the railroad tracks. It's been discussed. It made it to the DEEP. It was approved, and it was not funded. And there are other mitigating projects that are in effect or going to be in effect. For example, Federal Realty did a project. Ed is working on a project with the DOT on retainage for stormwater in that area. In one of our more recent extreme weather events, the Heights Road flooded exactly as the engineer predicted. It did flood, but it was much less than what we had seen previously. So some of the retainage and some of the mitigating projects that have been put into effect have had a positive effect. And I'm unaware of any plans or funding to replace the stone culvert underneath the railroad tracks at this time. It's got to be over a decade now when that project was first put forward. And I think it's dead unless somebody resurrects it.
Yeah. So Darren, that's a fair point, right? I mean, again, Frankie, again, I don't want to divert from the highway project, but again, I am firmly in the same place as Patrick, where if we're trying to solve the flooding, then we really need to. I would hope that we could address this as a system rather than piece by piece. Piece by piece, this seems like it's no blood, no foul to reduce the capacity that you're not even using. I'm concerned about the larger system, and if we actually do solve, I don't want to put an artificial ceiling on the volume that we can put through. If we ever do get to solve that stone culvert, again, I don't want to deflect from your presentation.
Okay, very quickly, to give you an idea of how it all shook out back in the day. Mr. Keene mentioned you're taking a problem and you're moving it. That's true. If we move the problem, we have to mitigate it. Mitigating the problem involves cutting 300 trees or so in the back of Baker Woods, in the back of Baker Field, digging it out. Part of the plan included construction of a dam. We had to go to the dam safety unit and get approval from the DEP for that. And again, all this was approved and vetted and discussed ad nauseum. But at the end of the day, I believe the residents were not in favor of that. It was certainly a political thing, which I do not have anything to do with. But as an observer, I could tell you that the tides changed, and it was a very, very expensive project, and it did have very real environmental impacts for the people who lived around Baker Woods. I think there was even a group called Friends of Baker Woods that formed, and so that's really all I could say about that. I can't I can't tell you that the project's ever going to go through. It would be my opinion, given that a decade has gone by, it's not going to go through. And I don't know, maybe it would gain popular support now. I don't know. I can't say.
All right, Darren, try and move along through the rest of the questions and
Thank you very much. When the water exits the pipe, what is the water course and its condition? The water course, I believe, is unnamed. And the condition is what you see a lot of in Darien, which is people have a stream in their yard. They want to maximize the lawn. They either pipe it or choke the stream down to as narrow a configuration as they can. I'm going to try and move some stuff around.
Good heavens.
Okay. Can you see that? You should be able
Yes.
to see that, right? Okay, so from the previous map, these two catch basins here,
Yeah.
there's actually, our catch basin is over in this area. It's up the hill just a little bit in this area. And here's the stream. So this culvert, if you could follow my mouse, does something like that. Culvert crosses on a diagonal, okay? And if I scroll down here, here's Maple Street, and you can see how narrow those streams are. And it goes down through Relihan, through private property. We were going to take easements in order to improve those streams because we would have to mitigate that. That would cause flooding there, make it bigger. And then into the back of Baker Woods. If I zoom out, the retention pond, to mitigate the flooding, first we were going to increase all of the capacity to get to this place. And then there was going to be a very large pond, sort of in a kidney shape here. And this is the Dulcetti 55 Norotan property where this water all exits and goes down Archer towards the town hall. So if let's see if I could drop the guy. That's Relihan. And should be that way. Here we go.
Yeah, there it is.
There it is. So what kind of condition is the stream in? You can see there's a head wall. The house is planted right on top of it. There's a fence, and it looks like to me the stream goes right underneath the fence. The people actually have the fence straddling the stream to maximize the property. And if you spin around, you can see that the stream is pretty much grown in. It's sort of a well-defined channel, if undersized. And I don't remember in all the work that we did there, I don't remember this having a name. So we don't know what it's called.
Conduit Canal.
Could be. We good there?
Yeah.
Okay. Is the Connecticut Department of Transportation obligated to conduct any hydraulic engineering analysis relative to water flow, velocity, impacts of upstream, downstream caused by the change in diameter of the pipe? Ed and I talked about this too. The word obligated tripped us up a little bit. I don't think the Department of Transportation is obligated to do anything. However, they are. And it behooves them to make nice with the neighbors in the town. I don't think we have the right to tell them anything. We will tell them, and that's what this process is all about, to get them to do everything necessary to hold our residents harmless and make sure that nobody downstream or upstream is being harmed. As we alluded before, the question Mr. Cameron raised about the culvert being the limiting factor is one of the reasons why we're not too worried, because there's only a couple things that can happen. One, the culvert is too tight or too restrictive to allow all of the water from Heights Road through the culvert. And in that case, if the culvert underneath the highway is oversized, all of that water will easily be handled. 2, if the culvert underneath the highway is undersized versus the culvert under the railroad being undersized, if the culvert under the highway were to be undersized, and let's say we did replace the culvert underneath the railroad, so we had no drainage problems whatsoever in Heights Road because the culvert was so big, it would be able to handle all the water that got there, and it would never flood in Heights Road. We would be dumping an enormous amount of water onto I-95, and the water would come out of the top of that catch basin and flood I-95. So it really behooves the DOT to do their due diligence to protect themselves in that case. And the engineer's analysis really shows exactly what we thought and knew all along, which is the culvert under the railroad is the limiting factor. So are they obligated? Yeah, they're obligated, but that doesn't mean we can tell them what to do. But they're going to hold public meetings. They've reached out to the residents. They've reached out to us first. We've discussed the engineering, and we're going to continue to stay involved. So we don't think that there's going to be any impacts upstream or downstream because there's really not going to be any change because of the stone culvert being the same. If you change the stone culvert, yeah, that changes everything. But right now, water's not going to be able to get through the stone culvert any faster. So you're still going to have an upstream problem to some extent, minus the mitigating factors that we talked about. And downstream, that culvert is going to pass more water than we give it. So the stone culvert, in effect, is, again, what the people on Maple Street and Relihan will see as it comes through their culvert. Good there?
I understand.
Okay.
Hey, Darren, can you put up the plan one more time? I think we should just talk about the velocity coming out of the end of the pipe first and what they have planned to do as far as mitigation. And I think it's a good point that was brought up on if we reduce the cross-sectional area, we increase the velocity, and how do you handle that change in this type of construction?
Okay. In this area here, you could see that they're going to enlarge this pond. And let's see, what does that look like? It looks like this. That's the current outlet. And there's the top of the big arch. And we have some other pipes coming in from other areas of I-95. It's always existed that way. And there's the area. And right here is the plunge pool. They call it a plunge pool. So this area is going to be enlarged, and it's going to be lined with stone. So that area gets bigger, so the velocity comes through faster when it leaves the pipe. However, it hits this big surface area, this big volume of water standing there. And if the flow is the same, and it should be about the same because the stone culvert will meter it out the same, all these contributing factors here are the same. Other catch basins on I-95. The amount of water leaving this plunge pool, which we just looked at on the street view on Google Map, is also going to be the same. However, the velocity coming through here is faster. It hits this and it gets buffered and leaves at the same flow rate. Now there's no changes in the stream proposed. So with no changes in the stream proposed, that stream will have the same capacity that it has now. It'll pass the same amount of flow that it is now. In other words, there shouldn't be very much of a change if it's even measurable. And this plunge pool will be the thing that slows it down. It's going, the only place the velocity is really going to be faster is in the pipe And at the discharge point of the pipe is obviously what we would be concerned with. And that plunge pool is going to absorb the shock. It's going to dampen it. Does that cover what you're trying to get at, Ed?
Yeah, no, that was fine. And Rolf, this was probably one of the questions that I thought was to put a little star by it, because I think it's something that the DOT should explain to the residents more. I think it's a concept that needs to be understood. When you reduce the size of the pipe, you actually increase velocity. How do you handle that? This is an engineering way to handle that type of impact, regardless of whether it be small or large. But this is how they do that, and it's something that they should have to and should explain at their meeting.
So that area where they're going to enlarge this plunge pool, I assume that's property that's owned by the Department of Transportation?
Yeah, see this property line right here?
Yeah.
Okay, and just let's address the elephant in the room. There's a shed right there, right on the property line. This is their property. This is private property. That shed is not on DOT property by this survey. And this plunge pool is on DOT property, not on private property, according to this survey. So I'm sure they're gonna, before they do the construction, they're gonna be very careful about delineating this property line to make sure that nobody encroaches on the other. At the end of the day, the stream discharge is what it is, and it's going to go where it does now and at about the same flow rate.
So if I'm getting this right, we're making the plunge pool bigger, but the water's coming out at the same velocity, and then we're honestly not expecting that plunge pool to overflow or flood that area?
No, it shouldn't. But to correct one thing you said, the velocity will be higher, the flow rate will be the same. So the velocity is only the speed of the water coming through the pipe. The flow rate is the overall volume over time. In engineering terms, we usually use cubic feet per second. So that's the flow rate. You have a volume over time, and the velocity is simply like your car, feet per second. How fast is the water coming through the pipe? So when the water comes out of the pipe, it'll go faster, but if the flow rate is the same, well, the pipe is, that plunge pool is not taking any more water. It's just to dissipate, the plunge pool is just to dissipate the energy as it exits the pipe at a higher velocity. The flow rate is still the same. So no, we would not expect more water leaving the plunge pool, or the plunge pool is not being enlarged to hold back more water. It will minimally, but it's not being enlarged for that reason. The flow is still going to be the same. You're still going to have the same amount of water coming in, same amount of water coming out. It's just going to be a bigger area to absorb the shock. If you can envision a garden hose with the nozzle on, the water's moving very fast through a narrow opening, and if you take the nozzle off, it looks like it's just drizzling out the end, yet you're getting the same amount of water.
Yeah, same volume.
Same volume of water over time. I guess that's.
So
what about flash flood? I'm sorry, like in a flash flood, is that still going to work like you're saying, or is it gonna? I'm sorry, I'm just thinking about all these flash floods that we've had over the past couple of years.
Yeah, no difference. It's going to be the same amount of water going in. I mean, you can have, there's different storms, and every storm has different flow rates. But when you get to an extreme flow, as you describe as a flash flood would be limited mostly by the stone arch underneath the railroad tracks. So the size of the plunge pool doesn't have much to do with that. The culvert, the only real change that you could make that would probably make a noticeable difference is if you made that culvert underneath the highway smaller, in which case I-95 would flood because the water would come out up here in that catch basin.
Can I just ask and maybe this is for Monica or town council, but what is the town, is this just informational? Does the town have to maybe not approve, but somehow in the course of this project, are we being asked to do anything to approve of this, or somehow I'm just trying to follow the lines of liability here?
Ed, I'm pretty sure that the DOT, I know the DOT is exempt from wetlands and water courses, for example. So your local body does not have any approval authority over a project like this. Obviously, they're working in a water course. And I think if you went to the Environmental Protection Commission, they would tell you very bluntly, they have no jurisdiction over state activity on state land.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
But you understand that this whole process of bringing the town involved and trying to get the neighbors up to speed and educated on what they're doing, and the whole outreach process is something that we've always asked them to do more of. And I think it's available now to us because of the virtual meetings that we can have. And I think they're taking advantage of that. But the other part of it is also having as qualified individuals such as Darren being involved in the meetings and asking the hard questions and trying to get them to understand that there are concerns in areas maybe where they didn't think there were concerns, or maybe they didn't know the back history of the Maple Street area or the Heights Road area. And that's where we come in being involved there, letting them know what those things are and what the concerns are. It's not just a normal pipe that they're replacing. It has other things attached to it. So I think Darren's done a good job doing that, and we're definitely going to stay involved in this through the whole process.
Thanks, Ed. And Darren.
It's Andy Millar. I have a question for Darren, going back to the plunge pool. I couldn't tell from the picture that you showed us, but it looked like that the current exit area was flat, sort of like an apron. And I wondered if you knew if the new one will actually be deeper than the current outlet, and if depth would absorb some of that velocity.
I can't tell from looking at the survey what the existing elevations are at this scale. The reason they're making it bigger, here they are looking down.
Yeah, Darren, you're breaking up.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. The reason that they're making this plunge pool wider is probably.
I apologize. He is breaking. I can hear him through the wall. I know he's talking, but he's doing his best. Let me see if I can answer that for you. These plunge pools are designed to do, as we come out of the pipe, drop down a certain distance, whether it be a foot or two, to collect not only energy from the water, but also silt that it could be caught in. Instead of going downstream, that's like a forebay to clean out too at the same time. What they also do is on the outside, directly in front of the pipe, collect the energy as it hits the ramping up of this plunge pool, if you will. So directing the water back to the channel of the stream. So I guess it's a good way to put it. I told Darren the best way to describe this is you're on a slide and you're going into a pool, and all of a sudden you hit that water and you stop and you slow down. This is the same thing that's going to happen with the water that's coming out of this pipe. Dissipate the energy, slow the stuff down so it can be directed and managed through the remaining channel out to Maple Street. Darren, are you back with us yet? No, I could.
Doesn't
Not
sound
on the
like.
computer.
Dad, I wonder if I could ask a question.
Sure.
Let's go on the assumption that this project is going to go forward, that they're going to put in this sleeve, which is albeit less in diameter than the existing one, but should not necessarily affect the water flow. And then let's think about the pipe under Heights Road. Should that ever come to pass where that pipe is put up for replacement, is it not then going to be limited in size to match the same adjusted diameter that this project is going to execute in that pipe under I-95?
And Rolf, I think that is a great question, and it's a great question for their engineer. I haven't seen the calculations yet, so I wanted to see about the flow capacity in comparison to existing and proposed, and I haven't seen that yet. And that's something that I asked Darren that we should have or we should get from them, because that's a really good question if we're looking to the future, and something that we do now restricts us from actually addressing possibly a problem that we're looking at on Heights Road.
Right, yeah, the intent of my question is, by going ahead with this project, are we in essence dooming, if you will, the Heights Road drainage to always be an ongoing problem?
And again, those numbers, we have to get those from the DOT or their consultant BL companies to take a hard look at that. And that's something I wanted to ask them.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? Nobody else has any questions?
Well, Rob, you know, I have a number of concerns about the project, but they all align with what's been discussed. I mean, I don't want to put I don't want to lower the ceiling on the flow rate further downstream from Heights Road. Even if that ceiling is not the limiting factor today, I don't want it to be the limiting factor tomorrow.
All right, well, that's kind of why I asked the question.
Yep.
Monica, did you want to say something?
Yes, Ed, if somebody wants to see an example of this plunge pool, are there any opportunities nearby?
Right.
You're muted, Ed.
That we want to do nowadays, we could probably Google it and get you a good shot of different types of plunge pools. And we could get those out to Rolf if he wants to send them out. But trying to think if there's anything local around here. Nothing that off the top of my head I could say, go here to take a look at that. And this is going to be a large plunge pool. So the magnitude of this is a little bit, if you look at it, it's almost as wide as one of the residential lots right there on Maple Street.
Yeah, see.
And again, when you look at it overhead on Google Maps, it doesn't look like there's that much room there. So I'm not doubting the plan here. I'm just having trouble reconciling the two.
Okay. All right. I think Rolf, you had two more questions at the end here.
Yeah, go ahead, but I think we probably already answered them.
Okay, no, I don't think you got to this one. This is a good one though. Is the project subject to WestCog review and approval? It isn't, to my knowledge, but it doesn't mean that we couldn't ask them for assistance if we needed it, whether it be advisory or technical. And you know, Darren and I had put our heads together a little bit too. If this comes down to where we possibly need a third party to review this, that's always an option for that we could do that if we had to. So, you know, we have some options to make sure that the design is being done properly, the area is being analyzed properly. So, but to answer your question specifically, WestCog, I don't believe has any authority over the DOT.
Okay, so they might not have authority, but they could be employed to weigh in with some sort of opinion or observations about the project.
I think they always like to be involved if the town's need us.
Well, that's why I raised the question. I mean, WestCog always likes to be involved, so why not this?
Well, you know, their expertise sometimes may not lie in where you need them, and I don't know if on staff they have people that do this, but obviously could direct us to a consultant that we could use, or we have a couple of consultants that we use on a regular basis to do third-party analysis to analyze certain things. So we're more than capable of either doing it in-house here with a consultant or asking for help with WestCog.
Okay. And last question, regardless of concerns, can Condot do what they want and leave the town of Darien to deal with the results of their work?
I do believe the DOT has the authority that we all think they have. But I also think what we're doing now can help with the second part of that question, so that we're not left here holding the bag or left here dealing with any problems. I think we have to take these opportunities of meeting with them and ask them the hard questions and get the good answers from them. If we're not satisfied, have Darren and I continue to push to get those answers so that we're not left with a problem. I think that's part of our job. I think that's why you have us here doing what we're doing.
All right. Do you plan on submitting any sort of, list of concerns, questions, similar to these notes, but to Condot in advance of that meeting on February 10th, I believe it is?
February 10th, that's correct, Rolf. And it's funny you should ask that. I have that at the bottom of your list of questions. Would you be adverse to me using your questions and adding on to them?
Not at all. Not at all.
Would you be okay if I edit them a little bit to make them more DOT sensitive?
Yeah, more engineer-like.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. I plan on being in that meeting, if nothing else, as a resident citizen of Darien and my concerns in that regard. I'll follow up with the committee to see if they want to take a stance and make any sort of statement that they would submit as the Town of Darien Public Works Committee for the RTM, and submit that. And of course, I would encourage all members to participate in the meeting on February 10th.
Very good. I think that will go over very well. I think they're looking for, I'm going to say constructive criticism. I think they're looking for some backstory too. I think Darren's given them plenty, but it doesn't hurt to hear how things have worked or have not worked in the past here. And I think we're going to get that at that meeting.
Okay, very good. Anybody else that wants to chime in here? I know Monica's moving on, and I'm sure Ed and Darren are going to move on soon as well. So last call.
Last call for the meeting. That stuff was, I'm new to this whole thing, so a lot of that stuff was over my head, and I've got a feeling that people are more in the majority of not understanding. Ed, I really liked when you said it collects the energy and puts it back into the stream or whatever, and taking it and making it more user friendly. A lot of these terms are extremely difficult for the novice.
I'm very sorry. I know I have to say, I want to make sure you understand, Darren and I struggled for about an hour today going through these questions to make them understandable. And they do carry quite a bit of terminology that could, I'm sorry, scare some people or confuse them. And that's not our intent. We don't want to do that. We want you to understand that there are some engineers out there that know what they're doing. And I think we're going to make sure that the DOT has them on staff working on this project, and make sure that at this meeting they address the public with a sensitivity of understanding what's being presented.
Right, because it sounds like this is happening whether they want it to or not. So gentle is going to be easy, right?
I don't understand that part. The meeting is happening on the 10th?
No. The project is happening one way or the other.
Well, this is our opportunity to have input. And, this project has to be done, or that pipe fails, and then the water backs up, and then Heights roads may flood differently. So this system is critical to our infrastructure as well. When pipes collapse or when they fail, there's also sinkholes and issues with roadways. So these are all things they're trying to prevent in protecting their infrastructure. This is a method they believe will work for them, this type of pipe intrusion. And I think it behooves us to ask about it. I'm curious about some of the things how they're going to do it. And when they're done, how do we make sure it's been done right? What's the as built, right? Tell me you built it correctly.
Right.
This is Jackie. If I could ask just one question. Carrie, you emboldened me. I'm also a newbie, so a lot of this is above my pay grade. But is there at all a safety concern about this plunge pool if it's going to be deep and there's water coming into it at a velocity? This is a very populated neighborhood. Is there any sort of safety question?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I haven't been back to these properties behind there, and I think that it behooves us to ask that question. That is also a good one, but I've seen them where they've built these plunge pools and surrounded them with fencing, whether it be 4 to 6 foot high chain link fencing. Those are things that they do to protect the areas so that they're safer.
Great. And is there a timeline for this, especially so we can see how the construction on Heights Road might impact the waterways to see if that changes the water flow at all?
I believe Darren has some type of schedule, and for the life of me, still can't get him to speak on camera anymore. He disappeared on us.
Can you guys hear me now?
Oh, yes. So,
Yes.
okay. So
I
you're
called in. I'm on the phone.
Okay,
Okay.
Darren,
I
you
don't know
have
what happened to the audio.
Darren, do you have a tentative schedule for this project?
Let's see.
The notice we got said it would be proceeding in 2025, so there's a fair amount of lead time.
Yeah.
Okay.
The meeting, obviously, virtual meeting, February 2022. Design deadline is August 2022. And I seem to remember what somebody just said about 2025 for completion of construction. It sounds about right.
Yeah, it's at 2025 spring to fall. Estimated construction cost 1.8 million.
Okay.
Very good, Frank. Spot on.
Yeah. Can I jump in? Sorry for my audio. I had to step away. Right when I got cut off, there was a question about the culvert precluding expansion of the pipe underneath the railroad track. Was that answered adequately? If not, I could just tell you very quickly, as part of the original proposal for us to jack and bore a new pipe underneath the railroad track, there were no plans to make the pipe underneath I-95 larger or handle more water. So again, the stone culvert that's there is the limiting factor. If we put a bigger pipe underneath the railroad tracks, the pipe that's underneath I-95 right now is already big enough, and the pipe that they're replacing it with is going to handle just as much water. So no, it would not preclude anything downstream. That this pipe that they're doing, if it's handling the same amount of water, would not preclude eliminating the flooding in the Heights if that project was ever resurrected and we were to put a new pipe underneath the railroad tracks. But again, as somebody mentioned early on, if you do that, you have to mitigate the stream, which we looked at through those people's yards, through Relihan, into the back of Baker Field, hold on to that water before it goes downstream and causes more problems.
Oh, wait a minute, Darren, I'm a little confused now. I was right up until that last point, I was with you, but now you're saying that if the railroad, the course under the railroad is improved, then even though the pipe under 95 would be able to handle the amount of water, you're saying downstream from that would then become a problem?
Yes, that's correct. Hold on one second. Here we go. Let me drop the little man down again.
So it can handle the amount of water now and what's planned because it's not handling enough water, right?
Well, we're not putting.
I think I agree with you.
Not
Well,
putting
the railroad's choking it off, right? So
yeah. So,
which is causing part of the flooding in the Heights.
Okay, so
I defer to Darren in terms of the hydraulics calculation, but the 10-foot culvert the 14-foot at the end of this project will carry roughly double the volume that the 10-foot culvert does. It's not off by a little bit. Those 4 additional feet of diameter give you actually double the volume that could go through there. So it's a lot bigger than the railroad culvert.
Yes, well said. And you guys can still see my screen, right? So
Yes.
Right.
this is the stream we looked at before. We're looking right at where the plunge pool would be in these people's backyard, right? So
So we're looking north.
we're looking north, correct, from Maple Street. So part of the proposal to eliminate the flooding in Heights Road by making a bigger culvert underneath the railroad track was to include improving this stream, and then if you go down on Relihan and you look here, you could see that there's a stream in here someplace, right?
Right.
And then it
comes out on the other
crosses. Yeah, it comes down and it discharges right here into the headwaters of Baker Field.
Yep.
Okay.
There's a big corrugated pipe there.
Okay, perfect. So from here all the way up to I-95 Plunge Pool was going to be improved. I-95 culvert that we're discussing here today was never going to be improved. It already has the capacity. So, yeah, when I talk about mitigating problems downstream, this is what I'm talking about. All the piping from the plunge pool, the stream beds. We were going to take easements from these people over here, make the stream bigger in their front yard, put bridges to get them in and out of their house. You can see how it's become such a big project. It discharges into Baker Field. Now, of course, Baker Field has an outlet, and that's over on Norotan Avenue by Park Place. So this is where we were going to build a huge detention pond with a dam to hold on to the water and meter it out more slowly. But the point is, to answer your question, the original question was, do we have to, by them doing this project, does it stop us from ever going forward and putting a bigger pipe underneath the road tracks? The answer is no, it does not, because this pipe is big enough to take all the water from Heights Road.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Ed, are you still there?
I'm here.
Okay, help me to understand, if at all, the project, I know you've been working with, I believe it's also Department of Transportation, the drainage at the Norotan Heights parking lot. I know that's a project you've been working on for some time. How does that come to play and tie in with any of what we're discussing?
Well, what I had proposed to do, and what we got a grant to design, was a detention system under the parking lot, north side of the Norotan Heights train station. Darren, can you put the aerial up on that? So what we had planned to do, it's basically, there's I think it's 1,700 linear feet of 4x4 galleries under that entire parking lot. What I was attempting to do is take all the water that runs off of that parking lot, and before it makes its way down into Heights Road, because that's where it goes, put it into galleries under the parking lot and have it infiltrate into the ground. And with the larger storms, as it fills up the galleries, what would overflow, I would tie it directly into the stone culvert underneath the parking lot. So basically, I'm trying to eliminate water that goes down into Heights Road, and waiting for the DOT to approve those plans right now. And,
well, could we leverage this project and tie that in and try and move that along, do you think?
Ralph, another good question. We have Darren has a meeting with them on Wednesday. It actually is to discuss this culvert replacement under I-95, as well as the detention proposal and infiltration proposal in their parking lot to the north. So they want to talk to it as an entire project to see what implications or any impacts that either one of those things could have on this area. Unfortunately, right now I have mitigation with Eversource and Pura. I'm sorry, mediation on Eversource and Pura at the same time, but I'm trying to get out of it so I can attend this meeting. So if I'm not there, Darren will definitely be there anyway, but I'd like to be there also.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think maybe we can work a package here somehow.
Well, I do want them to approve the plan. They've had it now for over 2 years. And I definitely want to move this along and show that there is no impact downstream on their project down there. And what we're planning to do is basically mitigate the runoff from their parking lot onto our roadway. I think that's pretty much how I sold it to the DOT when I got permission to do the design.
Yep.
Now, waiting for them to approve it.
Okay. All right. Well, we've covered a lot of territory here. Anybody else? Last call. I said that about, what, 10, 15 minutes ago.
Ralph, thank you. Thank you to all the residents, all the members that came into this. Was a good opportunity for me and Darren to explain this and get this out into the public a little bit more, and hope to see you all on the 10th when they have that public meeting.
Very good. All right. If I may speak just quickly to the committee members, does anybody have an opinion about issuing any sort of statement from the RTM Public Works Committee with regards to this project with Department of Transportation? If you want to say something, unmute yourself. I guess no one wants to.
I think we've expressed a number of concerns here, right? I mean, I can build off the comments that Patrick's made and the comments I've made. I don't want to be repetitive. But I think, I don't know if we need to make a statement as the committee before we hear them present the plan.
Okay.
The flip side is, Ed, once they present this plan, is this a train that can no longer be modified at all? You know, I would ask, you know, we certainly would want to have a chance to have input here on either the strategy or the implementation. So I wouldn't want to miss our opportunity. So if we're running out of time, let us know.
Yeah, well, Ed, I think Ed signed off, so I don't think he heard you, Frank.
Got it. Sorry.
He's still here. Ed's here.
Oh, is he? Okay.
No,
He's muted.
I'm still here.
All right. So I guess the Frank's question is, is this like a one shot that we get here with this meeting and that's it, or is this the beginning of saga that could go on into the future and future meetings as well?
And I think it actually, if you're asking me, Rolf, I can tell you that it probably depends on the questions at the meeting, right? Which direction they go, or are they answering it to your satisfaction? It's, nothing that can't be solved by a meeting a month later once they come back with some good answers and some redesigned plans. This doesn't move forward smoothly if they can't get some type of consensus from us that say, okay, we understand you've looked at everything now. You've showed us, whether it be visually or through calculations or documentation, that this project's not going to be harmful downstream. I think that's important. And I think getting that information from them is important. So yeah, this is not just your one shot, but let's take your best shot and your first shot. Let's see what they have to say, and then if there's something issued after that, I know they had planned another information meeting in March, so there is some time to get them some type of statement, some additional questions you may have that they maybe have answers for at that next meeting, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, so this could be, if you will, like a first salvo.
Yeah, and I can tell you from being in the engineer's seat, they hope it would be the only one.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But that's not how it always works out. So the company that they're using is a good company. I've used them before here and in other jobs that I've had. Good company. They make good representation, and they've followed through on what Darren has asked them. So I don't see that changing.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Olben,
Yes,
Mr. Olvin, are you in control of the meeting now?
yes, sir.
Okay, so I don't have to do anything. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So is there any other comments or any other statements anybody wants to make with regards to what we've learned here tonight? All right.
Hi, this is Lindsay Kelly. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Lindsay.
Yep, I do want to reiterate or kind of support what Frank said. I'm not clear or following why we would have to make any type of statement with the DOT, and maybe you guys can enlighten me about that. It just seems premature, and we're still have a lot of questions. But I don't actually know what the statement would entail.
Well, it is a little complicated, I have to admit, particularly, for someone who's not an engineer. I think, we just want to try and impress upon the Department of Transportation that we as a community take this very seriously, and that we are a little nervous about it, if you will, and kind of put them on notice that we just don't want to just glide through this without considering all the possibilities and that are involved with, particularly with when you consider the pipe up on Heights Road and how that comes into play with how it feeds down into this pipe that goes under I-95. There's more to it than just, okay, we're going to line the pipe and that's it, it's done. I think that's what's going through my mind, at least.
I think you're absolutely right. And I firmly say, letting them know that this is a sensitive area because of the impacts flooding has had over the many years, I think is very critical for them to hear from not just Darren and myself, but from the residents and from the committee members.
Ed, Frank here. Here's the question I should have asked you at the beginning an hour ago. I'm sorry. If this pipe was put in 1955 per the documentation, why is the DOT looking to either line it or replace it now? What puts this on their radar now?
Can I jump in? Okay.
Sure, go ahead.
They believe it or not, they consider this a bridge. It has a bridge number.
Yeah.
And they have a bridge inspection unit, and they probably identified that it's time.
So there's not any acute problem that they're trying to solve at this point. This is more as part of their routine inspection, maintenance, and upgrades.
My understanding, they're trying to keep out in front of all of their bridges and address the maintenance or replacement. And this one came up. It was either due or it just sheer time, or they found some deficiencies to correct it.
Yeah. In the description of the existing bridge, they reference some deteriorations that have occurred that need to be repaired in the process of relining the pipe. How serious it is. It's hard for me to say. I'm obviously not an engineer. The structure is in overall fair condition, rating equal 5. So it's not in distress, but apparently they have identified it as something that needs to be addressed.
And the new pipe that they're putting in is going to be structurally sufficient on its own. That's what they're aiming for.
Thank you.
All right, then, if we don't have a consensus on any sort of committee statement, then that's fine. I will be involved with this. I will be going to the meeting. I encourage all members of the committee to go to the meeting, as well as residents of Darien. Hopefully, this will get out on TV 79, gather more attention for people to get involved and participate. If there's no other comments, then I'll consider a motion to adjourn. Frank, you willing to make a motion to adjourn?
Ms. Cardona is waving her hand.
Yes.
Okay.
My husband needs the computer.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do I have a second? Okay. Anybody? Frank, help me.
Yeah, I'm seconding. I'm here.
Okay, very good. Frank seconds. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Okay, this
Thank you.
meeting is now adjourned. Have a good evening and thank you for participating.
Thank you,
Thank you,
folks.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Take
Take
care.
care. Bye-bye.